Good morning, and welcome to Health Talk here on AM 1270 and 96.5 FM KXBX. Paul Thomas with Bill Turney in the studios from North Lake Medical Pharmacies. And Bill, how's it going with you today?
Well, beautiful, gorgeous day. Didn't start out my day like I did yesterday in the dentist office for 3 hours, so I'm feeling pretty good. You know, I had chipped a tooth and had to have a whole new crown put on, so they had to take the old crown off in pieces and then get an impression. You know, they do all this electronically now. They get computers in there, make an impression of your old one, and match the color and everything, and they put it in an oven and and make it, and
there
then
it is.
there it is, and you're back. You know, so well, lucky that I was going to call my dentist this morning, and I said that it worked fine. I'm chewing big hunk candy bars and eating beef jerky. I'm sure he would have gone nuts, but
You would have freaked out, yeah.
But doing good today, and a beautiful day out there. We're starting to get into the spring and summer months rather quickly. I guess it's going to cool off this weekend, but
That's what I saw, yeah. Possibly even a couple sprinkles, so the rain still kicking around, you know. If,
well, it hasn't affected the Giants and the Warriors. I mean,
No, they did pretty good. They both won it last night.
They did. I was flipping back and forth between I had a board meeting where I live, and got back, and the game had just barely started, and
Although the Warriors didn't play well, but they still won. They played terrible.
oh,
I thought.
their shooting was just unbelievably poor. Great defensive
Good
effort.
defensive effort, yeah.
I mean, when they score under 100 points, it's pretty unusual that they win. I don't know what the final score was, but
I can't remember either.
it was right close to 100.
Right close to 100, yeah.
Anyway, we're going to be talking about your health today, and of course those things are so dominant with the opiate things that are going on, and I just kind of want to apologize to a lot of our customers because we have been so busy with the transition from CVS when it comes to pain medications that we're having to do everything we can just to keep up, and I'm training new employees, and I know it's a little awkward, and if in fact something happens that you're not getting your prescriptions, the only thing that's taking a lot of time are people trying to get their narcotic and controlled substance prescriptions a day or two early because they're used to doing that at another pharmacy, and it's not going to work. Your count and our count. You tie us up on the phone for sometimes half hour at a time when we tell you no, and I'm the pharmacist in charge at both pharmacies, and I own both pharmacies, and I'm not going to take a risk. And if you're on a pain medication, if you have to do without it a day, what you don't understand is if you had to be off those completely, if you're not terminal, you're not going to have anything but withdrawals from not taking it, and then you're not going to have the pain you think you're going to have. We have conditioned you into believing that if you don't take this medication that you're going to be in pain the rest of your life. Are you going to be in pain the rest of your life? You certainly are. And as we get older, that happens, or even if this happens when we're younger, all pain medication is tell the brain it doesn't hurt. And it doesn't do anything to heal you. It doesn't do anything to at the cause of the pain. If you think you're going to be pain-free the rest of your life, you're not, even by taking the medication. I spoke with an individual on the phone and argued and kind of tipped me over on one side, and I apologized to him, but I said, look, if you had to do without the medication, what you don't realize is that this drug is no longer effective. It's effective because you think it is, but when you've been on it this long, it's going to diminish your pain some, but you'll always have pain. And if you're taking, there was a study that was just done by the veterans, and it was just published this week about people taking ibuprofen, and these were vets, and people taking Norco or Percocet, oxycodone or hydrocodone, And at the end of the study, which was a 6-week study, and then there were people that were taking placebos, the people taking placebos and the people taking ibuprofen were better off with fewer side effects, no constipation, no GI intestinal problems, and the ibuprofen was actually helping the inflammation that was causing the pain, whether it would be the diagnosis on most of these things has been lower back pain. We all have lower back pain, especially if you've been injured or especially if you're older. You're going to have lower back pain. And as long as it isn't nerve pain, it's going to be very tolerable. And if it is nerve pain, they will put you on a drug called gabapentin probably, which is specific for nerve pain, and they will put you on an ibuprofen. I just had my mouth reorganized yesterday, and I was told to take ibuprofen for the pain. A year ago, they would have given me 30 Percocet or 30 hydrocodone or Norco. Today, we're not doing that. And so all of you who are on chronic pain medication at some time are going to have to have a reduction in that dose, and eventually they will either find a substitute in one of those things we're going to talk about now, or there will be a tapering of your medication, either in quantity or in the amount of times that you take it a day. The physician has to show you some way to reduce you being on that drug. You will see more physicians prescribe Suboxone now, which will help you detach yourself from the opiate medication. Now, there are some physicians that are doing Suboxone and the opiate, and that's not going to help you any. It may help you some to withdraw you, but it's not going to, the rest of your life, you can't take the combination of both of those. Or they will ask you about Narcan, which is a reversal of the effects of an opiate if you OD. Sometimes people forget about this spiraling crisis that opiate abuse. It's a clinical fact about narcotic pain medications, and it's basically unwanted side effects of the drug that are highly effective at blending the pain. But addiction, of course, is a particularly dangerous and disruptive side, since it hijacks a patient's brain and demands increasing doses of opiates to hold withdrawal symptoms at bay, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're only keeping you from having withdrawal. But what if there was a drug that did the job that opiates do best, relieve pain, without promoting any of those negative side effects, especially addiction, which is huge. I can remember being discharged from having a broken back and prescribed 120 oxycodone and OxyContin in between, and have the oxycodone for the breakthrough pain, and then go back in a month after my surgery and have another one, and then maybe another one. By then you're addicted. This week there was a process for designing opiate-like drugs that would act on pain receptors in the brain while blocking the receptors responsible for making you dependent and building a tolerance up. So listing the facts that you're having the pain, these relieving, they call them peptides, released by the brain as models, and they developed a library of what we call peptodomimetics, which means they're actually duplicating the effect on the brain that the opiates have. These agents were small enough to get into the brain, and they worked on opiate receptors in different ways. When they tested a compound in mice, they found that it not only relieved pain, it also induced less buildup of tolerance, meaning they relieve pain and It didn't require more and more drug to do the same thing, and less physical dependence than morphine. And in other words, it really was less addictive. So what we're trying to do is solve the opiate epidemic by working the most fundamental problem, the effective treatment of pain, and doing experimental studies in order to do that. So they're doing this in San Diego, and our work can also provide other researchers with a better understanding of opioids receptors and interactions between receptors, which could be exploited to develop better options for pain management. Now, when the information came out about this, they said, we're going to be coming out with a drug that's a non-opiate that works better than opiates, and they're not addicting. In fact, the headlines on this article was, the engineered painkiller works like an opiate, but it isn't addictive in animal tests. Now, we don't know what that means. We don't know. This is just mice. Too often we go down past that level and then eventually induce it into more human-like species, and we find out there's a different reaction. But we won't know for a while. It's not out there now. For now, what you're going to have to do is to want to get off these medications. You have nothing but side effects from them, and all they're doing is keeping you from withdrawing from pain. I know you don't feel that way, and I know you feel jeopardized, and I understand, believe me, the dilemma in not being able to get your drug. I had a person in yesterday that had had surgery and had a replacement part of his body, and I said, how are you doing? He says, great, absolutely no pain. And then in the next breath, he says to the clerk, where is my pain medication? And they said it hadn't been okayed. And he just got done telling me that he didn't have any pain. And I didn't confront him. He was a friend, and I let the girls handle it. Eventually, probably he will get his pain medication. But honestly, not even knowing what he said, you know, I have absolutely no pain. He'd been on the medication for a while, and I'm sure he was developed a dependency to that. And that's what we're trying to get away from. When you go into a doctor's office today, just like my experience yesterday, and I didn't ask for any, but if I had been prescribed pain medication yesterday, besides ibuprofen, I would have taken it because I didn't want to hurt. Now, guess what? I have no pain. They expected to have pain. Most people have. I have a very high tolerance for pain, but I would have taken those 30 Norco, thinking that I didn't want to hurt until it healed. And it's just a matter of repeating that 2 or 3 times before you're convinced that without this medication, you couldn't make it. And believe me, I've had my back broken, my neck broken, another lumbar surgery, another cervical surgery where I lost the use of my right arm for a period of time, and eventually about 25% of the use, and a lot of movement in my neck. And there are people that don't want to get a fusion because it will limit their ability to move their head from side to side. Yes, if you want to come up behind me and stab me in the back, I'd have to stand up and turn around before you'd get your job done before I'd be able to turn. But is it my quality of life better? It certainly is. And I don't take any pain medications, and I didn't need any pain medications, and I still have probably 20 of a pain medication that was prescribed to me when I broke my femur, which will be 2 years in November. Now, I'm going on my fishing trip, Paul, next week.
Oh, I hope you get good weather.
And my first thing my dentist said was,
don't hurt yourself.
Don't chew on that weight to put it on your line.
Yeah.
Because I'd cracked a tooth.
Yeah.
And he says, and stand up or sit down in the boat, but if you're standing up, hold on to something. And he says, every time I hear you're going fishing on your trip, he says, we all wonder if we'll see you again. So I've got lots of bubble wrap to wrap myself with in case. And I don't know, we're going up to Trinity in Lewiston area. We go twice a year, and the river runs or the lake runs pretty rapidly coming out of Lewiston. But
what are the boats you guys are? Are they little dinghies, or are they?
No, we used to be in like 12-foot or 20-foot rowboats. I mean, that had a small engine on the back. That's when we were going to Howard's Prairie up in Oregon. And then when we came down here, we're in pontoon boats, so
much more stable to stand up on,
and hold a cocktail. And,
sure.
And this is.
And these are the important things about the fishing trip, right?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a gentleman's fishing and drinking club. I seldom participate in both, but I do catch fish. And we've had a hard time up there catching fish in the spring because of the river, or the water comes out of the dam pretty rapidly. And but with 4 people, usually we had 2 or 3 people in one of those smaller boats. We can have 4 or 6 in a bigger one. And not as easy to go from place to place. So, but we're not in any hurry. We fish 2 days from sun up to sundown, and compete for the biggest fish. And I'm just being extra careful. I've thought about, even wearing a seatbelt, but the chair would just fall over and I'd fall over in the water. And in those other boats, those smaller boats, we would fall in the water all the time because the lake up at Howard's Prairie gets like Clear Lake does. I mean, it's like an ocean sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets pretty rough, so sometimes by the afternoon it's difficult to stand in those boats, and every time you catch a fish you stand up so you can catch it. But I've been out in the ocean too, and fishing for deep sea fish, and it gets pretty rough out there. There's sometimes we go out there that I would just as soon not have gone out, but you get halfway out there, a mile or so, and you say, well, we're going to be enduring the same thing coming back. So anyway, that's a whole other story. It only has to do with my health, not your health. So I saw an article yesterday that I had never heard of this before, and I printed it out just because I wanted to know what they were talking about. And the article was, FDA cracks down on Juul, Juul, sales to kids. Now, the Food and Drug Administration has launched what it calls a blitz to stop convenience stores and other retailers from selling e-cigarettes to underage kids. And it's focusing especially on a product called Juul, Juul. And it's an e-cigarette that looks like a flash drive, and they've warned 40 stores about using the product to children under 18. And it really does look like a flash drive. When I saw the picture that accommodated the article, I thought, what are they talking about? It also persuaded eBay to control listings and ask the makers of this drug to turn over marketing research and other documents to help explain why it has taken off so quickly with the teens. Now, I'm way above past teens, except my grandchildren. Some of them are in college, some of them are teens, some of them are 3 and 4 years old. So NBC News had reported that the FDA's responsibility to protect kids and significantly reduce tobacco-related diseases and death, these were the first step in a new effort that were aimed at stopping the use of e-cigarettes. Now, I just recently, went overseas and I flew a lot because I end up going to board meetings, and I'm on in the airport frequently, and I'll go into a shuttle car that's going from in Atlanta or Chicago or Sacramento or San Francisco, that's going from one terminal to another terminal. And I'm amazed at how many people that are in those cars are smoking e-cigarettes. And then when you get in other parts of the country, the amount of people that are, including kids, that are smoking real cigarettes is really quite different than California. So, and when I talked to one of my grandchildren in Sacramento, and they were vaping in the school, and the school was aware of it, but there's no way when you're vaping that you know what that product is, and they would go in the bathroom and vape. Now, this kid's a 4-point student, you know, very athletic, was on the volleyball team and track and baseball, and but everybody does it. So some of the new electronic nicotine delivery systems have become very popular with the kids, and those products are more difficult for parents and teachers to recognize or detect, and several of those products fall under the Juul brand, but other brands such as My Blue and Candy Pins have similar characteristics and are emerging. And any way they can package these products to make it more attractive to sell and less able to detect, they will. Those and other products that look like flash drives don't produce the visible vapor that the other e-cigarettes do, and that makes them easy to conceal and more attractive to kids. Last week, public health groups, including the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Truth Initiative, and the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, wrote the FDA to ask them to remove Juul from the market until it undergoes an FDA review. Now, you realize that over-the-counter substances since 1994 in the Natural Substances Act do not have to go under FDA review to be on the market. And educators report there's a widespread use in school bathrooms, hallways, and even classrooms. The FDA is not going to go that far, but said it would try to stop the sales to minors. At first, they were announcing they've been conducting a large-scale undercover nationwide blitz to crack down on the sale of e-cigarettes, especially the Juul products to minors, and at both brick-and-mortar online retailers. They started April 6th and will continue to the end of the month, and they've already revealed numerous violations of the law. Remember us talking about Caratem about a month ago, which was an opiate-like drug that was a natural substance that was being used over the counter because it was available over the counter by different retailers, and they were getting high from it and they were getting pain relief from it. But NBC News said that it issued 40 warning letters to various businesses, including 7-Eleven stores on the East Coast, Maryland, Virginia, and Massachusetts, vaping retailers, gas stations, and other convenience stores in the country. This action should actually make a notice to retailers, on notice, to stop selling their product to minors. Advocates said that was a great piece of action, but said it didn't go far enough. So today's announcement is a step in the right direction, but the FDA needs to accelerate actions when it comes to regulating e-cigarettes and remove flavors known to entice use. So keeping e-cigarettes on the market without first evaluating them is putting an entire generation of young people at risk. This whole millennial and later from them has been a big turnaround when it comes to using drugs. We're going back to the 60s now, almost as we were, several years ago. So the FDA could and should mediate action to address those issues, and moving forward, they should utilize this authority to prevent the introduction of kid-friendly tobacco products in first place, rather than taking action after they become popular. So they said in 2014 they would regulate e-cigarettes and ban the sale to anyone under 18, but last summer They extended the timeline for applications for new e-cigarette clearance by the FDA to 2022, which made e-cigarette makers and infuriating medical groups around the American Lung Association. So they can help smokers when they're trying, and that's what they were originally produced for, to help smokers quit. But it has become an epidemic proportions for another alternative for kids to get high. eBay's swift action to remove the listings and voluntarily implement measures to prevent new listings from being posted on the retail site was a large goal. And the FDA asked the makers of Juul for marketing documents and any studies that they have done and they've conducted and the results of those. So we don't really understand, especially me, why these products are so popular among youth, but it's imperative that we figure it out. It seems like when we find one thing, we find 10 others. Somebody asked me about salt the other day, and I was thinking they were talking about bath salts, which are hallucinogenic, and actually it was some kind of an Earth Day enhancement dance that they were doing, and I kept trying to get back to what does bath salts have to do with this, and it was something completely different. So that's how naive I am about some of these things. You know, we already have in place programs to prevent and, if necessary, identify and act on the violations at retail and online market places, and they're going to introduce new measures in upcoming days. The e-cigarettes use a device that delivers fluid laced with nicotine and flavors, and including marijuana, creating a smoke-like vapor, and they're promoted as a safer way to use tobacco. It's also called vaping as a way to quit smoking, but it's generally become a big use for the younger people to use it to get high. Many studies support that the kids who vape are more likely to use other tobacco products and show that vaping delivers potentially harmful chemicals. 20% of high school students have used at least one tobacco product recently, most of them e-cigarettes. So I don't know how relevant that is to your lifestyle or how relevant that is to anybody that may be in your family, but it's certainly more relevant than I thought it was, and the use has expanded, as I was talking about. Some people, you know, in my distant family that are doing the same thing, and it's become very prevalent in schools, very prevalent outside, and there doesn't seem to be much of a issue with people that are taking that risk. To be honest with you, I haven't looked to see a lot of kids vaping, but I guess that happens a lot in places that kids frequent all the time, and I'm normally not in some place where there's a lot of teenagers at one place, but evidently it's become very popular, and to the point that it's become very discouraging if you're trying to prevent youth from having tobacco use. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the best thing for stiff joints.
As our aging population continues to increase, we as healthcare providers and also family members have an added responsibility to take care of them. Hi, my name is Bill Kearney, pharmacist and owner of North Lake Medical Pharmacies in Lakeport. Our senior population brings us new issues as they continue to age. Our bodies change as we age, and they need a pharmacy that cares about their care. I had a lady come into our pharmacy the other day and ask if we still were a locally owned pharmacy. She was tired of the lack of compassion at the big chain pharmacy she was dealing with. When you become our customer, you will see our goal is to get to know our customer. We believe personalized attention combined with competitive prices are what people are looking for. So when you come into our pharmacies and our employees call you by name, don't be surprised, but feel how important you are to us. That's why our family-owned pharmacy has continued to exist this 38 years in Lakeport. North Lake Medical Pharmacies with 2 locations to serve you, on Hill Road East across from Sutter Lakeside Hospital, and outside the Bruno Shop Smart in Lakeport.
Mendocino County hosts the annual Human Race on Saturday, May 5th in downtown Ukiah. The Human Race, coordinated by North Coast Opportunities, is a nationwide community 5K run and walk composed of teams raising funds for local nonprofit organizations. Categories to participate are the 5K Adult and Child Walk, 5K Adult Run, 5K Child Run, and the Kids Fun Run. For a registration packet, visit the website mendohumanrace.com, and for more information, call 391-7963.
Hi, I'm Mia Hamm. As a professional soccer player and a future soccer mom, I know how fun and rewarding sports can be. I also know how frustrating it is when you're sidelined by an injury. So I've teamed up with the American Association of Orthodontists to ask young athletes to play it safe when playing sports. I spent years training to become a world-class athlete. I know what it takes to become an expert on the field. Orthodontists understand this too. They're experts in their field, helping kids and adults obtain healthy, beautiful smiles. They want to help athletes prevent injuries and stay in the game. It only takes a second to get hurt, and too many athletes are risking injury because they're not properly equipped during games and practices. Wear the right protective gear, like mouth guards, face masks, and helmets. Your first line of defense against preventable injuries. Play it safe, achieve your goals, and keep smiling. Visit braces.org.
We bring the community closer together, supporting business in every way. We're helping make your dreams come true, working hard for you.
The Lake County Chamber of Commerce would like to recognize their Member of the Month, Tompkins Tax Consultants. John and Diane Tompkins have been serving Lake County since 1974 and have been a member of the Lake County Chamber of Commerce for 24 years. They provide services to many small businesses and individuals in Lake and Mendocino County. Their main office is located in Lucerne off Highway 20, and they also have a second satellite location in Lakeport at 576 Lakeport Boulevard. For more information, reach them at 274-1843.
Lake County Chamber of Commerce, we're steady and strong, help us shape the future.
All right, we're back.
Well, you know, I saw this article from Medical News Today, and it was about what's the best thing for stiff joints, and I thought, you know, everybody has a difficult time after working all day, or especially if you're doing physical labor of getting up, and I notice, you know, I don't have any trouble getting out of bed. Maybe it takes me a little while to pick up speed, but at nighttime when I sit down after I get home and have dinner and I sit down to watch TV or work on the computer, and I'm there for a couple hours and I get up, you know, for the first few steps, I really hurt. And of course, as you get older, those things happen, and a lot of people may experience that as they age. Others may have joint stiffness due to medical conditions and lifestyle choices. Sometimes you can treat the muscle stiffness at home. Many people tend to feel that after sitting for long periods of time, like I was talking about, and after first waking up, you know, I have somebody that does work for me around the pool that gets in the hot tub for an hour before he goes to work because he hurts so bad, and he's older and not as old as I am, but certainly has had problems with his back and his shoulders and his arms, and some people experience just a mild discomfort that goes away after moving around. Others find that stiffness lasts longer and is more uncomfortable. Since I've been in the office more instead of out dispensing, sitting at the desk is harder for me actually than standing up. In a lot of other situations where you have the stiff joints may impact your mobility, and people may have difficulty putting weight on because they don't feel like working out or exercising. Some factors that may cause joint stiffness include being overweight and, of course, arthritis as we age. other kinds of inflammations like lupus or bursitis. And you wonder why that happens. Well, most people, age is a common cause of really stiffness, that primarily because of a lifetime of use. And, you know, we're replacing knees, we're replacing shoulders, we're replacing hips. Any number of those joints may be affected. Bursitis, which develops when tiny fluid-filled sacs in the joints called bursa become inflamed, and that inflammation causes pain as well as stiffness. And as we talked about with opiates, all opiates are going to do is going to tell you it doesn't hurt, but the inflammation will continue. That can happen to nearly any joint, but it's most common in the larger joints, such as the shoulders and the hips and the knees and the ankles and the elbows. Believe it or not, it's also common in the big toe, like gout is. It usually heals by itself, and a person should individually reduce activities that move the joint. And too often what I find out is people that have a condition like this, which is fairly common, as soon as it quits hurting, they go back to doing the same thing. Now, they may be a carpenter, they may be a bricklayer, they may be installing pools, but they're doing things that physically cause that to happen. You could be a tennis player, and it's in your elbow. So resting the joint always gives time and allows them to recover, causing the pain and stiffness to kind of go away. One of the huge things is osteoarthritis. Now, there's two kinds of arthritis. We'll talk about both of them. But the osteoarthritis is a degenerative type of arthritis that affects a whole ton of people in the United States, probably 27-30 million. That type is due to wear and tear and is therefore more frequently seen in people over the age of 65. You'll be amazed how many prescriptions that I get on these controlled substances that code it as being for osteoarthritis. Again, they're doing nothing to alleviate the inflammation. It also affects a lot of parts of the body, but fingers, hips, knees, back, neck. As it progresses, it can cause swelling and pain and cracking noises with movement. If I turn my neck quickly, it'll just pop like crazy. They usually center around relieving the pain, the kind of treatments, and reducing the swelling in the joints. People whose osteoarthritis is particularly painful and debilitating may require surgery to remove some of those fragments, and especially in the back where you have the joints and the discs that can degenerate. Another diagnosis that I see many times for people with opiates is degenerating disc on the lower back. So again, the opiates do nothing to relieve the inflammation. And the inflammation caused by a ruptured disc, for example, can be pressing against a nerve. And if you get that, either go in and have surgery and have those partials of that ruptured disc removed, and that will keep it from touching, or taking anti-inflammatories that will help relieve the inflammation, might easily go away. You can even do exercises that will strengthen those bones and cause some of those areas to not be inflamed anymore. Now, the other kind of arthritis is rheumatoid arthritis. And you don't hear us talk about that very often because it affects only about 1.5 million in the United States compared to 30 million in the United States. And it attacks, your body actually attacks itself. So the immune system attacks otherwise healthy joints. And people with rheumatoid arthritis experience pain and swelling, and this just keeps on body attacking joints. There's no cure for rheumatoid arthritis. You'll see people taking very expensive medications, and we call those disease-modifying drugs. They can keep the rapidity of that disease progressing. They can slow it down tremendously with drugs like Humira and injectable drugs like Remicade and those kind of things that are anti-inflammatory drugs and are very expensive and work rather well to modify the disease. And there's a series of other medications, and some of the things you don't know about with rheumatoid arthritis, it can mimic fibromyalgia, it can mimic lupus, it can, you can have a fever, you can be falling asleep, you can get dizzy and fall. I mean, there are different forms of this disease that affects different parts of the body that you aren't necessarily relating to joint pain. So it's a serious thing when you see people with these knots on their hands and these knots in their fingers all curled up. That's rheumatoid arthritis. And you can imagine how painful that is. And some get to the point that they can't use their hands at all. Lupus is another autoimmune disease that does the same thing. It causes the immune system to attack healthy tissues such as muscles and joints. When lupus attacks the joints, they include swelling, stiffness, and pain. Again, the pain is caused by the swelling. Again, opiates aren't going to do anything to reduce the swelling. It's often difficult to diagnose because many of those symptoms are similar to other medical conditions like fibromyalgia. There's no cure, and symptoms will get worse over time. I've had several people in my lifetime that I've been associated with that have had lupus. Most of them have been very effective in controlling it with medication, not curing it, but controlling it. Along that line has nothing to do with joint pain, but I went to my dermatologist on Monday to have my biannual checkup for skin cancer, and she said, "What about this place on your nose?" She says, "I thought we prescribed something for that, a steroid cream." And I said, "You did, but it stopped working." And she said, "How do you mean it stopped working?" And I said, "Well, I used it until the rash went away, and then I quit using it." She said, "Did it say on there to use it until the rash goes away and then stop?" And I said, "No." She said, "Didn't I put refills on it?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "That's something you need to tell your patients when they, and I will remind you, you need to keep using that." And it's kind of like a fungus. It's a white, the skin turns white and kind of peels off. And I use it for 2 or 3 days, and then it doesn't happen anymore, and then pretty soon it's there again. So even pharmacists can learn. Another anti-inflammatory, unless you're too old, condition is called gout. And if you've ever had gout, I don't need to explain this, but it's a sudden onset arthritis. And it tends to affect males more than females. It develops quickly with symptoms sometimes appearing overnight. Often it's in the big toe. I have a friend of mine that has acute gout, and because she has neuropathy in her legs, she has no feeling in her feet. But when she touches something accidentally, like a garden hose or a pebble or something, because many times she does not want to wear shoes, and she's supposed to be wearing braces as well. All of a sudden, she has this incredible pain, and we had gone to several physicians, and finally at CPMC, the rheumatologist diagnosed it as acute gout because she has no feeling in her feet. When she hits something or touches something, it becomes automatically inflamed, and in order not to have that, there's medication that you take to keep that from occurring. But once it occurs, it's very difficult to control. Symptoms include severe pain, severe tenderness, stiff joints, swelling, and increased warmth of the joint. Back in the old days, they said this was the disease of kings because it was predicated on drinking red wine and eating cheese and eating red meat. It typically appears for a short period and will go away. People with gout often get symptoms and off and on throughout their life. So many people are taking a drug, called allopurinol, which is a brand name of Xyloprim. It comes in 100 milligram and 300 milligram. and you take it the 100 milligram 3 times a day, the 300 milligram once a day, and it keeps those crystals from forming. And what gout is a forming of crystals in that joint that are just like glass, and those crystals form, and it feels just like there's glass inside that toe or that appendage or wherever it seeks to go. And you have to keep that uric acid down. It's uric acid that causes that, and that keeps those crystals from forming. So, and it just depends on, I mean, some people take it the rest of their life. Some people don't want to change their lifestyle. And it isn't always food that does this. It can be other things too. So your triggers are many different things, but frequently it's alcohol of some type that does it. Well, excuse me, when do you go see a doctor? Well, you don't like to go to a doctor, and it's not very easy to see a doctor like it used to. My sister lives back in Iowa, and she says, I'm going to change doctors. I just don't like this doctor I go to. And she says, I thought she was the one, but she doesn't give me much time. And if she's not there, I see somebody else. And I said, well, I want you to do one thing. I want you to, first of all, realize that in the last years of your life like this, you're not going to be able to see a doctor like you used to. She lives in the Midwest. She lives in a rural community. And I said, there aren't that many people going into general medicine where you live or where I live, and frequently you're going to have to see a rotating physician, or you're going to have to see a physician's assistant, which are very qualified to see you and what your problems are. But don't get angry or disappointed, because healthcare is changing a lot, and I would expect by the time that I leave this earth that the pharmacists will be doing a lot of the prescribing. I was with one of my board members in Los Angeles a couple of weekends ago, and he's in Palm Springs, and he actually is prescribing for hospice, controlled substances, pain medication, end of life, and there is a license in California that allows you to do that if you take extra schooling. At my age, I don't want to take that responsibility, although if I was 20 years younger, I would do it in a heartbeat. But when stiffness comes on suddenly or doesn't go away after a few days, people should speak to their doctor. They should also speak to the doctor if they have that really rapid swelling or severe pain, deformity of a joint, loss of mobility in the joint. Back when I grew up, the farmers never went to a doctor for anything unless they were dying, and they usually were. So there are home remedies that you can use, include hot and cold compresses, taking over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, losing excess weight, doing exercises. Frequently you just hurt and you don't want to. Eating a balanced diet, taking supplements such as fish oil. What do you take away from all this? Well, many people will experience joint stiffness as they age, and we should expect it as we age. Most often, the stiffness will wear off after you get up and exercise and move around. Other people may experience that joint stiffness as a result of some other kind of condition. So anyone who has a doubt about the cause of that stiffness should speak to the doctor to help rule out or treat an underlying condition with proper treatment, home remedies, and some of the things that we just gave you as medications can shorten the duration of that stiffness you have and make you really want to see somebody in order to make it go away. And I'd use those over-the-counter remedies first, unless it's acute, meaning it comes on really fast and it's really painful. This article doesn't affect a lot of people, but it does affect my life, and I thought I would share this with you. ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, where the person actually loses the ability to walk, and eventually It affects the brain, so you can't breathe. And it mainly attacks the motor nerve cells or neurons that regulate the muscles behind voluntary movements such as walking, talking, and chewing. And in this country, it affects about 14,000 to 15,000 people in the United States. And it starts as a stiffness and a weakness in the muscles, but eventually advances to the point where the brain can no longer control voluntary movement, and individuals lose the ability to eat, speak, move, and eventually breathe. One of my relatives has a disease very similar to this. It's called CMT, and it's Charcot-Marie Tooth syndrome, and it doesn't get into the nerves, but it does affect the ability to walk and the ability to breathe and respiratory. So several genes have been linked to this ALS, and we actually go to an ALS physician. You know that several people that are athletes have been diagnosed with this disease, and this can disrupt their whole life as cell structure and function for increasing susceptibility to environmental factors, and some of those are a reason to kind of suspect that they may be involved, gases and particles that we breathe that may be involved. But this is what intrigued me about this disease. The link to physical activity, this study was done in Ireland and the Netherlands, and the link to physical activity arose from a few small studies of particular cases, the most famous one being that of Lou Gehrig, which is why the disease also carries his name. But the data came from questionnaires filled in by 1,600 adults who had just been diagnosed with ALS, and almost 3,000 matched individuals without the disease. They lived in Ireland, Italy, and the Netherlands, and they were matched by age, sex, and place of residency, and were in their 60s. And this response contained detailed information about smoking, alcohol, lifestyle habits, job history, level of physical activity, work, and during leisure time. They converted the physical activity data into metabolic equivalent of task, which allows calories consumed to be expressed as a ratio of the amount that is turned when one is just resting. Using that data, they gave the amount of time per week spent in each activity and how many years that activity lasted for, and rendering it to be a compendium that gives those kind of scores for different activities. They calculated a physical activity lifetime score for each person. The higher the score was, they were tied to a higher risk of ALS. And it showed their lifetime physical activity during the hours were linked to a 7% risk of ALS and a 6% raised risk for leisure time. Combining all these things together gave an overall increased risk of 6%. And this was particularly marked in the subjects who lived in Ireland and Italy. Now, I don't know if a bit of the grape they might have been drinking or a little bit of Scotch whiskey might have had a little bit to do with it. Being from Ireland originally, I'm thinking it might have been, but they didn't say that here. But using the overall increased risk of 6% for all activities translates into 26% higher risk of developing ALS in the patients who had the lifetime highest scores compared with those who had the lowest. They found that ALS risk rose in line with increasing lifetime scores, which supports the idea that it's more common in athletes and professional sports people. They point out, because of the observational nature of their study, their findings do not prove that vigorous physical activity causes ALS, but other factors such as metabolic or energy disorder or even trauma or diet cannot be ruled out. So there isn't any simple answer linked to this study, but there are no simple answers for any kind of disease trait, and especially ALS. Whether or not physical activity might increase the risk of ALS, it has something to do with the nervous system. We know there's a type of a nerve cell death that has been observed in individuals with ALS, and it occurs when the chemical messenger or the neurotransmitter stimulates nerve cells. So they caution, while it might be tempted to imagine that physical activity raises the risk of ALS through excitotoxicity, or the central nervous system is susceptible, any such suggestion at present is purely hypothetical. So this is one of those things that I tell you, 2 weeks from now there may be another article that say it has nothing to do. But why it prompted me to look at it was because frequently who we hear about the most are athletes that get ALS. And we think right at the prime of their life, after they've just retired, they are subject to this debilitating disease. And Dwight Clark, for example, who was with the San Francisco 49ers and has been up here many times playing in our golf tournaments, has ALS, and he's I believe he's in a wheelchair now. He goes to the same physician in San Francisco that we're familiar with, Dr. Robert Miller, and he is doing as well as can be expected. He's a fighter. I've known people with that disability to go for years and get to a certain point and not get completely to the point where they couldn't ambulate or couldn't talk. But that's rare, and I just kind of wanted to put that in your heads just in case you ever wondered why these individuals, and again, this is just a study done on Irish and Italians and Dutch, and whether or not that same study would be significantly different here, I'm not sure. But I want to remind you that we're only here for a while, and then we're all going to be gone. And whatever you can do to make your quality of life better, I suggest you do that. And one of those things that I mention every radio show is to get if you're over 50 and your insurance will help you pay for it, to get your shingle shot. The FDA just came out last week and recommended everybody over the age of 50 should get vaccinated for the shingles disease with this new vaccine. I had a person just recently who had no reaction from the first shot, got her second shot this week and had a pretty good reaction on her arm and was very concerned about it. And she had a right to be, but that's very common. That's one of the side effects of that medication frequently. I'd like to remind you that we're North Lake Medical Pharmacy with 2 locations for you. At 5136 Hill Road, across from Sutter Lakeside Hospital, and outside the Bruno's Shop Smart at 347 Lakeport Boulevard. Give us a call there at 263-1328. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Bill, and we'll see everybody back here again next Wednesday for Health Talk right here on AM 1270 and 96.5 FM KXBX Lakeport.